Good evening. I'm Mike Mackay. I'm your host with the most DS, BDSM, kink, and fetish talk on Blog Talk Radio. I almost said the most BS, and that's probably true too. I am the author of Domination and Submission, the BDSM Relationship Handbook, and I am your host this evening on Domination and Submission Radio. Our topic tonight is protocol. If you don't know what protocol is, you're in the right place, and hopefully you'll learn something this evening. If you do know what protocol is, maybe we can expand your knowledge just a little bit and maybe polish up those BDSM and DS manners of yours. So we're going to be talking as part of a call-in show. If you want to call in and tell us a little bit about your opinion or ask a question or just rant or rave about something, then please do. The number is 347-857-1862. Let me give you that number one more time. Go ahead and write it down. You know you're going to call me. It's 347-857-1862. When you call in, just talk to the call screener or to me if I get a chance to screen the call before bringing you on the air and give me an idea what you want to talk about. Let me tell you how you can also be a part of the show in other ways other than calling in and hearing your voice on the radio. You can email me by going to our website at domination-submission.com. That's domination-submission.com, and you can just click on the Contact Us link, and you'll be able to send me an email that goes directly to my inbox. You can also visit our chat room. If you're listening to us live on Blog Talk Radio, just scroll to the bottom of your screen and you should see a little chat room there. If you are logged into a free account at Blog Talk Radio, and it doesn't take much to register for that free account, then once you're logged in, you can actually chit-chat with us in the chat room while the show is broadcasting live and ask your question there. If I see your question in the chat room, I'll do my best to get it on the air and answer it, or I'll give your opinion some airtime as well if you have an opinion you'd like to share with us there. My co-host, Little Red, is busy with family stuff this evening, though she may call into the studio if we get a chance to hear from her. That would be a cool thing. I also want to wish happy birthday to Jade Mackay. Here you go. Jade Mackay.
Happy birthday to you.
Those were Mike's minions singing happy birthday to Jade. So I just want to wish her a happy birthday. It's coming up on the 27th. We're a little early, but better early than late. Now, I do have a report to give you about my trip out to Los Angeles for DomCon Los Angeles. That's a convention just for dominance, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about it before we got into our topic this evening of protocol. It was a great event, and most of the events I go to have a specific theme or a specific audience that they cater to, and this particular conference, fetish event, is geared primarily towards the professional dominatrix crowd. So I would say about 80% of the people at DomCon Los Angeles this last weekend were professional dominatrices. I guess that's the plural of dominatrix. And so it was a very interesting crowd, and I had a very good time. I have to say this is probably one of the best organized and friendliest fetish events that I have been to all year, and I've been to several so far, and I have several more to go to in the course of the rest of the year. So if you are going to be attending any major fetish events anywhere in the country later this year, you just might see me there. So get in touch with me, and maybe we can hook up and have coffee, or you can buy me a sandwich. A guy's got to eat. I'm a starving writer here. So overall, it was a great event. I presented a workshop on the Warrior Princess Submissive, which is coincidentally not the topic or the subject matter of my next book, which will be released sometime in the next several weeks. And it's about a new breed of submissive that is a submissive for the 21st century, not your typical conventional submissive that you often hear about. This one is a submissive who's a liberated woman, an expert in her field, a very dominant sort of personality in public, but a submissive in her personal dynamics. So just think Xena, the warrior princess, who at the end of the day, after kicking ass and taking names on the battlefield, goes back home and kneels at the feet of Hercules, her master. And so this is the Warrior Princess Submissive. Look for it at Amazon in just a few weeks. And believe I will be presenting one more time on the Warrior Princess Submissive in New York City at BDSM Writers Con in New York, August. Let's see, what are the dates on that? I think it's August 21st through the 24th. So if you're anywhere near New York, or you're going to be near New York around that time frame, by all means, check out BDSMWritersCon.com. It's not just for writers, it's also for readers and for fans of the BDSM genre. And if you're interested in attending, just get with me and I can give you a special code that will give you $75 off the entry fee. So that's enough for you to buy me a sandwich and a beer after the conference. So we'll be good to go. All right, so let's see, a little bit more about the conference in Los Angeles. It was well attended. They had very large BDSM play parties at the end of each day of the conference, which was about 4 days long. I think they had 3 days of play parties at the LA Sanctuary, which is a very large BDSM club in Los Angeles. And if you are anywhere near Los Angeles and have not visited the Sanctuary there, then I highly recommend it. It's a fun place to go, very fun place to go. And I believe there's one in Dallas as well. So Sanctuary, Dallas, Sanctuary, Los Angeles, check them out. Great BDSM club, lots of great equipment there. Some interesting demonstrations and presentations and scenes up on the main stage, and lots of little nooks and crannies and equipment that you can see just wandering through the BDSM club to check it out. So do visit it if you've not had the chance. And if you've not gone to a fetish event like DomCon Los Angeles or ShibariCon, which is this week in in Illinois, and then I believe there's FetishCon is the biggest one in Tampa, Florida, and that's in August as well, August the 7th through 10th, and I will be there giving a presentation on coining, or what I call coin striping, which is the American or English translation of a Chinese word, guasha, which is a form of abrasion play, which leaves bright red stripes up and down somebody's back, which doesn't hurt either. So, I mean, you get some great marks, but you don't have to give up any pain to get them. So it's kind of a cool thing. It's actually a form of therapy in Asia that people pay good money for. And it's almost like cupping in that sense. It's sort of a therapeutic thing. It feels like a massage, nice, warm, and toasty for the rest of the night after you've had a coining episode. So check it out, and if you're curious about coining or any of those sorts of things and don't want to wait until August or travel all the way to Tampa to see my presentation, then contact me and we'll talk. All right, so we are going to talk tonight about protocol. Now, what is protocol? It's a word that you've probably heard again and again as you've explored this lifestyle, and it's really just a fancy schmancy word that means manners or the unspoken rules that you are expected to know and to follow as you go deeper into this lifestyle and remain a part of it. You're expected to follow certain rules, and these rules are really not written down anywhere. Well, they are. I mean, there's always someone who's willing to talk about it or to write about it. But the bottom line is there's no one authoritative source that you can go to, like the Ten Commandments in the Bible or something. There's no Bible of BDSM lifestyle play, and so there's really no one authoritative source to find these protocols. So how are you supposed to learn them? And then what happens if you don't learn them? What happens if you ignore them or inadvertently violate them? Well, all sorts of things can happen. And I'll have to tell you, I have inadvertently violated some of these protocols myself. So this is not going to be a matter of Mike Mackay lecturing you on how well he has followed these protocols and how you will probably screw up. No, because Mike Mackay has screwed up himself. And in fact, not too long ago, I actually had event security accost me in the hallway at one of these fetish events because I had pulled my phone out and I had made a very serious blunder. At the beginning of the event, they had a ribbon cutting ceremony in the main lobby of the hotel, and we're downtown. It's like a Hilton hotel. It's in downtown Dallas, and they were opening up an exhibit in the main lobby for the public, not just people who were attending the event, but the members of the public were able to go into this exhibit about the International Master Slave Competition, and they had pictures and histories and all sorts of things that you would expect to see in a museum. And while they were doing the ribbon cutting, there were several photographers there with these very big fancy cameras with flash bulbs and everything. And I thought to myself, well, all these other people are taking pictures. I guess it's okay to take a picture, because I knew, and I have always known, that most fetish events do not allow you to take pictures, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the reason is very obvious. A lot of people are still in the closet when it comes to being in this lifestyle, and they really don't want to see their pictures showing up on the front of the newspaper or on Facebook or Twitter or wherever with any connection to the lifestyle. But I thought, all right, well, this is a very public event. There are 300 people standing around. It's in the lobby of a major hotel in Dallas. There are all kinds of non-lifestyle people around. There are vanilla people wandering up and down through the lobby, including people with their kids, and here are all these people with cameras taking pictures. And I thought, all right, I guess it's okay to take a picture. So I pulled out my camera and I took a picture. And damned if security wasn't on me like chicken on a June bug. They were on me almost instantly. We saw you take a picture. I went, well, yeah, everyone's taking pictures, right? Well, no, only those 3 people over there are taking pictures, and they have been pre-authorized to take pictures by the people in the ceremony, in the ribbon-cutting ceremony, and they have already signed non-disclosure statements that they will not publish these pictures to social media or have them in the newspaper or, use them to blackmail anyone. So those people are cleared. You're not cleared to take a picture. Please delete the picture. So I said, here, no problem. I deleted the picture right there in front of them, and everything was fine, and they went back to being friendly. But that just goes to show that even someone like myself, who's been around this lifestyle for 37 years, and I thought that this rule was easy to understand. I've explained the rule to a million people a million times, and yet here I was just less than a month ago. I blundered and violated the rule myself. And so, again, this is just to reiterate the fact that these rules are sometimes very easy to break without even thinking about breaking the rules. And unfortunately, they can be very subtle, and they can be, they're not in your face. You're just expected to know that just because everyone around you is taking pictures doesn't necessarily mean that you can take a picture. Maybe all those people have gotten permission and you haven't. And so protocol is a big deal. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how you know what it is you're supposed to do, how you actually follow those rules, and what happens if you don't. In this particular case, I could have been escorted to the door and banned from the event, but I wasn't. These people tended to be pretty nice about it, but it's very simple for that sort of thing to happen. And in fact, those were the rules when you registered for the event. Those were the rules that you signed up for. You actually have to sign a piece of paper that says if you pull your phone out of your pocket at any time during the event, you can be thrown out of the event and banned. They don't care if you're taking pictures or not, because they really don't know what you're doing. Once your phone comes out of the pocket, they don't know if you're taking pictures or not. And so what they have just said is, your phone comes out of your pocket, you will be escorted off the premises. End of story. So we'll talk about that and some other protocols that you're expected to follow if you're going to be a member of this lifestyle. And by this lifestyle, I mean the DS lifestyle, the BDSM lifestyle. But there's a lot of gray area in between those and on the fringes there. So we'll talk about that as well. You'll hear or see a lot of stuff about types of protocol, and sometimes you'll see references to high protocol or low protocol or moderate protocol or special protocol, and there really are no hard and fast definitions of any of those terms. They mean different things to different people, and consequently you will probably be best off just assuming that protocol is protocol. Manners are manners when and wherever you are, and don't really worry too much about classifying what type of protocol you're following, whether it's high or low protocol or special protocol or whatever. Now, of course, there's definitely going to be protocol that is geared specifically to your DS orientation or whatever role that you play in the lifestyle. There are going to be different types of protocol for dominance versus submissives, and even for switches or people on the fringes of the BDSM or DS lifestyle, such as people in the LGBT lifestyle, the leather lifestyle, and other subgroups, and particularly something like a Gorean lifestyle. If you're a member of the Gorean subgroup in the BDSM lifestyle, and they don't like to be listed under the BDSM lifestyle, they tend to think of themselves as part of the DS lifestyle. But your protocol as a Gorean is going to be very different than your protocol as a someone who's just your bread and butter dominant / submissive lifestyle. So again, we'll talk about some of those differences. Now, I think we've got little Red in the studio now. Let's see if this is Red or not. It might just be somebody pretending to be Red. Hi, Red. Is that you?
Who missed your favorite redhead?
Yeah, well, hey, I'm home, so I'm ready to make some trouble now. So we're going to be talking about protocol tonight. I know you have some very strong opinions on this. You got anything you want to say before we start wading into the weeds?
Oh, no, I'll wait till we wade into the weeds, and then I'll become Little Red in full force at that point.
Okay, now are you going to be with us the whole time, or you have to go early here?
I don't know. If I have to bounce out, you guys will hear it quick. I love you. Bye. I'll call back later.
All right. Okay, so now, obviously, we mentioned a little bit about how protocol can change from by whatever role you are in the lifestyle. If you're a dom, your protocols are a little different than if you're a sub, for example. There's obviously going to be a lot of variations in protocol based on where you are or the situation you find yourself in. For example, your protocols at a munch are going to be a little bit different than the protocols that you would observe at a play party or in your personal relationship, So the protocol at a play party is a little different than the protocol between you and your dominant. And in fact, we were joking about this last night, weren't we, Red? We were at a munch together, by the way, for our listeners. Red and I saw each other at a local BDSM group coffee last night, and Red was sitting with her dominant, and I think if my eyes weren't deceiving me, I think you took a poke at your dominant in the ribs, and then he said something about that not being. Oh, he poked you back, and there was something about that not having been pre-negotiated. Now, and of course, I had to be the one to step up and say, you know what? In one of these committed relationships, you don't have to negotiate every little thing, do you, Rick?
No, you don't. It was we started out. We have a game we play. And he popped me, and it didn't say anything, and I popped him back. Well, he pops me back, and I popped him back. And he goes, oh, are we feeling froggy? Well, yeah, I'm in happy 6 shots of heaven of Starbucks, bouncing off of espresso. And we're going back and forth, and he changed the rules of the game. He goes, no tag backs. You can't change the rules of the game mid-game, whatever. And we were picking back and forth. But one of my comments was that was never previously negotiated. Mm-hmm. And it's a running joke because everything is open for negotiation, especially when it comes to, how you want things done, whether your submissive walks to the left or the right, whether, she kneels, doesn't kneel, talks to other dominants, doesn't make eye contact, whether
she pokes you in the ribs at Starbucks, right?
You know what? Or, Booby Mountain happens to be in a corset and gets, your head laid on him at a bar full of vanillas.
Sure. And I think this brings up the point that protocol is going to vary from where you are, what you're doing, who you're with, who is within within view or earshot. A lot of those things have to be taken into the proper context. So, of course, where you are, and we talked about, you could be at a munch, you could be at a play party or a public dungeon. You might be on a date with somebody who's a prospective partner, and whether you're dating that person for the first time or the 20th time might have a lot to do with what protocols you observe. Or you might be sitting next to your lifetime partner at McDonald's or at a munch or something like that, and those protocols are going to be a little bit different. So we're going to try and differentiate those things because there's no one-size-fits-all rule to anything that we're going to be talking about tonight. And, of course, who you are, whether you're in a master-slave relationship versus a DS relationship versus a Gorean relationship, whether you are a professional dominatrix versus somebody who just discovered the lifestyle yesterday, these things all make a difference in which protocols apply to you and how you implement them. And I think we'll probably start, Red, with just talking about approaching somebody else in the lifestyle for the first time and talking to them, since that's probably the biggest challenge for somebody just getting into the lifestyle. You know, a lot of people will be a little afraid or a little anxious about attending their first BDSM munch because they really don't know how to talk to people. How do I address people? What should I say? How do I, do I have to curtsy when I go up and say hello? Should I salute? Should I hug them? What should I do? So,
don't
of course,
touch unless you're told.
Well, we'll get to that. But let's just talk about how you address. Let's just talk about how you address someone. Now, when you are meeting someone for the first time, Red, and you know that they're in the lifestyle, but you really don't know who they are, or what their role is. How do you address someone?
I usually go, "Hi, I'm Little Red, and you are, spinach."
Okay. All right. So you don't.
That's mine, because if I have no idea whether you're a master-slave relationship, your Gorean relationship, I have no idea who you are. I'm not cyber-stalking people and, knowing everything about them before they show up. Mm-hmm. I'm me, and I say hi, and, and then we go from there.
Sure. So now you don't adopt a formal tone or use any formal language then. You just say, "Hi, I'm Lorette, and you are," and you just hope they toss out a name and give you some kind of a clue how to proceed. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's kind of...
We did the same thing when I first met you. We went around the table, everybody at that coffee munch, mm-hmm. and everybody kind of introduced themselves, and we all kind of went from there.
Sure. Yeah, and that's very typical. Usually... if it's important to people, in terms of if how they are addressed is important to someone, usually they'll give you a clue right up front. Very often, if they want to be addressed formally, or if they want to be treated as a dominant, they'll make sure that you know that they're a dominant. If they want to be treated as a submissive, they'll let you know that as well. Most of the time, nobody's going to jump down your throat for calling someone sir or ma'am, and this is usually my recommendation is call someone sir or ma'am just as a default position until you find out. Because if someone, I know what you say because I've heard you say it 1,000 times, so if someone comes up to you and says, "Hi, how are you, ma'am?" what do you say?
Yeah, I work for a living. Don't call me ma'am.
Right. And then you usually tell them that you're a switch or a sub, but you're not angry with them, are you?
No, it's in a joking tone, because you say "ma'am," I'm looking over my shoulder for my mother or my grandmother. Right.
And I've actually seen a few submissives or slaves get a little bent out of shape because someone called them ma'am. But, you really can't blame somebody if they don't know and they've never met you before. So usually you're in a good position by addressing anyone as sir or ma'am, and they'll tell you if that's either too formal or you've assumed the wrong role, that they're not a dominant, that they are a submissive, and they don't like being called ma'am, or maybe they'll have another term that they prefer be used, like mistress or lady or your highness or grand poobah or something. And so usually there's no problem whatsoever. And this has always been my recommendation, is if you don't know if somebody is a dominant or a submissive, you either just use their name if you know it, or just say sir or ma'am, and they'll correct you. And it won't be in anger. They'll say, "Oh, you don't have to call me sir. I just happen to be a switch, or I happen to be a primal, or I happen to be submissive," or something along those lines.
Well, if I was going to a normal munch, first time going to just a whatever meet and greet at, coffee or a pizza place or whatever, it's going to be way more informal than if I knew I was going to a dungeon and I knew all of that. I would automatically change the roll up. An informal meet and greet, where it's, jeans and T-shirt, are approved, wear, then it's not so much as important to me as if I'm going into a dungeon and I know there's, 20 or 30 masters in there, dominants, and, 15, 20, 30 submissives in there. I would automatically assume they're sirs or ma'ams until I'm told otherwise at that point.
Sure. Now, I think that we probably need to address the main reason why a lot of people go to these kinds of functions. There's really only two reasons why somebody goes to something like a BDSM group munch or an event or a dungeon or whatever, other than to play. either you go there because you just like being around people who share the same values and same lifestyle that you have. That's probably the one main one. But you have to remember that there are an awful lot of people who attend these things because they're looking for a potential partner. And this is really their only hope of finding one who shares their lifestyle. You're not going to find a BDSM dominant at the local liquor store, and you're not going to find, the submissive you're looking for, down at the library, probably. But you might find somebody who shares that lifestyle with you at a local BDSM munch. Now, so a lot of what we do socially at these things, particularly if you're looking for a partner, is you're trying to attract the potential of a potential partner. And there are good ways and bad ways to attract their attention. And just off the top of your head, Red, what do you think some of the ways that might be appropriate at a local cocktail party, a vanilla party, or a vanilla nightclub, or some hookup, bar downtown? What are some of the things that you might be able to get away with there that you can't get away with or wouldn't want to try to do at a BDSM event?
Well, poking the sadist. Which is always one of my favorite games. Mm-hmm. Sorry,
I just heard
my dom's with me.
Your local sadist in the background.
Yes, my sadist is here. You might be a little bolder, a little bit more flirtatious than you would say if you're walking into a dungeon and you're solo and you're looking around and, it's an open play party because we have clubs that are close to us that do have open events. Mm-hmm. That you wouldn't want to act out of what you are because somebody's going to know what you are pretty quickly, especially if you're in a total environment that is nothing but us. We're going to figure you out pretty quick.
There's also a lot of things that you could get away with in a BDSM environment that you couldn't get away with out there in the vanilla world at a vanilla club. And one of them just got mentioned in the chat room by our friend Kaylee down in Dallas. And there's a story behind this. Kaylee says one of the things you might not want to do in a vanilla environment is zap yourself with an electrical zapper. And there's a story behind this because Kaylee just a few weeks ago was down at Bondage Expo Dallas, and she bought herself one of these electrical static electricity shock toys and was going around and shocking herself and others. So they stood around producing large electrical shocks on their boobs in front of the crowd, and it's probably not something you would do down at your local vanilla nightclub. Is get out your nipple zapper and start shocking yourself. So, but that's an interesting. Thank you for that comment, Kaylee.
You don't want to bend somebody over a bench and just start spanking them because they got out of line in a bar versus in a dungeon. In a dungeon, not so that's kind of commonplace. They have spanking benches for that. But in a bar, you really don't want to bend somebody over in a total vanilla setting and then just bust out a paddle or a belt or a crop.
Now, kind of staying on that same topic, though, of attracting the attention of a potential partner, like I said, there's a lot of people who attend these things because they're looking for somebody, and they're trying to get their attention. Now, there are ways to get a person's attention in an adult way, and there are some not-so-adult ways of getting someone's attention. For example, when you were in elementary school, it might be acceptable or it might be expected to, if you were going to get a little girl's attention, to tug on her pigtails or to tickle her, to tackle her on the playground or something. This is not something that you want to do at an adult BDSM-oriented munch or play party or something like that. In fact, you don't.
I'm all for having pigtails pulled. What are you talking about, Daddy?
By a stranger, Red, you know what we're talking about here. But by the same token,
I just had to be me. I'm sorry.
I know. By the same token, though, I think that there not only is there a responsibility for someone trying to get your attention to know what is and is not acceptable, I think there's a certain responsibility for the person on the other end of that attention to know how to tell somebody to piss off, or at least to say that they wish to respectfully decline their invitation to go into the back room and get naked or something. So there are...
I have a very, very good one. It's awesome.
Okay, what is it?
My collar.
What about your color?
You know, my
Oh,
color.
as
You know,
a
I
way,
have.
as a way of telling people to piss off.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but you know, you
You
got to
see
remember
this? Go talk to him.
there are a lot of people who wear collars as a fashion statement. So just because somebody has something around their neck does not necessarily mean that they're taken or that they should be unapproachable for that reason. And not to mention the fact that there are a lot of people who have collars that aren't worn around their neck. So it might be a bracelet, it might be an anklet, it might be a tattoo or a brand.
Yeah,
or,
but mine's kind of hard to miss because it's a locking one, and it doesn't come off unless he decides it's time to take it off and switch out for a day collar or something.
But
so mine's a little bit more neon sign.
Sure, but there are people out there wearing those types of collars who are not collared per se. So even that is not a what do you call it? An unambiguous symbol, I think, and particularly for somebody who's new to the lifestyle and is not familiar with protocol, and that's what we're talking about tonight. People who don't know the rules. How are they expected to learn those rules? And just because you have something around your neck doesn't necessarily mean that they shouldn't talk to you. In fact, not every dominant has a requirement that you go through him to initiate conversation or to invite you to the backseat of his car or something like that. I mean, not every dominant requires you to get his permission or requires somebody else to get his permission before you establish some line of communication with somebody. So we'll talk about that in a second, particularly in the online sense. There's a lot of online bullcrap that goes on, and very often needs to be routed through somebody who can screen out the pretenders and the jerks and the dipwads and stuff like that. So we'll talk a little bit about how that's done after the break. We are going to take a real quick break now. This is Domination and Submission Radio. You're listening to Mike McKay and Little Red, and we'll be back in about 2 minutes. And we're back. You're listening to Domination Submission Radio. My name is Mike McKay. My co-host, Little Red, has dropped off the line, but we'll see if she comes back into the virtual studio anytime soon. If not, it was good talking with you, Red. We talked a little bit about the collar before the break, and so we probably need to follow that up with a little clarification, because I probably made it sound as if collars were not that important, because anybody could wear a collar, anyone can go out there and buy a collar at your local Spencer's Gifts and wear it around as a fashion statement, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they are or should be unapproachable, but there are a lot of people at these events who are wearing an honest-to-goodness collar, which means that they are essentially owned by a dominant out there. If not owned by a dominant, they're at least in a very committed relationship. That's what the collar represents. And so how would you talk to or approach a collared submissive? Well, the first thing you do is, if you have any doubt in your mind whether that person is collared, what do? You ask. You don't assume anything. You don't assume that just because someone has a collar around their neck that they are in a committed relationship, but you also don't assume that it's just a fashion statement. You ask, are you collared? Are you in a relationship? Are you his submissive? Are you that person's slave? You can ask, and you can also be attentive and observant to see how that person interacts with the other people in the room, particularly people who might happen to be that person's dominant or master. So you can learn a lot just by watching, and I very much recommend it to anyone who is a little bit unsure of how to proceed in any kind of a situation. And this is not just in BDSM-related events, it's just in life in general. If you don't know how to proceed, watch how other people are proceeding. Watch how people are behaving, how they interact with the people around them, and you can learn a heck of a lot. And you can probably avoid some very embarrassing faux pas or mistakes in the process. So the first thing, if you have any doubt in your mind whether the person you're interested in, and that doesn't necessarily mean interested in terms of wanting to be a partner with, but just somebody that you want to have a conversation with, somebody that you are curious about or just want to say hello to, just ask them if they are collared. And if they are collared, then you might want to ask to whom and whether or not that person minds if you have a conversation. Because believe it or not, sometimes they do mind the fact that you are having a conversation with his or her slave or his or her submissive. Sometimes that is against the rules, and you are actually getting that person in a lot of trouble because maybe that person has standing orders not to engage in conversations with strange people, and there you are chit-chatting away with this poor submissive, and that person's going to suffer at the end of the night for having broken a very plainly stated rule in their relationship. So you don't want to get people in trouble. You don't want to overstep boundaries that you don't even know are there. So ask. That's all you got to do. If the person is a submissive or a slave and their dominant is in the room or at the event, then find out who that person is and ask that person if it's all right if you get to know this person, or if it's all right for you to have a conversation, or if you're in a social scenario, if you can buy that person a drink or buy that person a sandwich or whatever. Now, also remember that just because somebody is a submissive, let's say they're not a collared submissive, they are single. Well, just because that person is a submissive doesn't necessarily mean that person is your submissive. You have no right to treat that person as if they were your submissive at all. Until that person tells you that it's okay to treat them that way, you have no right whatsoever to even test the waters there. Don't try to establish your dominance. Don't try to test the person to see if they are really a submissive, because guess what? You're probably going to get kicked in the balls. If you have balls, you might be a woman dominant, and in which case you'll probably get kicked elsewhere. But let's just say this is considered extremely bad manners. All right? It's a breach of protocol. It's considered very, very bad to test someone's submission, especially when you don't know that person, or to somehow suggest or even imply that they should be submitting to you when you are a complete stranger to that person. So don't do it. Don't even go there. Don't even start in that direction. Now, some of the other things you really don't want to do, and this is all part of protocol, believe it or not. I know we're talking about assumptions and things, but do not assume that just because someone is into the BDSM or DS lifestyle that they are a swinger. Right? This is something that unfortunately is incredibly common, is that when you tell somebody that you're kinky, they think you're also promiscuous. Just because you're kinky doesn't mean that you want to have sex with everyone. It means that when you do have sex, you like it to be kinky sex. So do not assume that just because somebody likes to be tied up, that they want to be tied up by you. They probably don't. You are a stranger. You're an unknown, and they probably are very particular about who they allow into that little bubble of theirs. So please never equate being a swinger with the BDSM or DS lifestyle. It's the quickest way I know of to become persona non grata or become kind of a pariah in the community is just assume that everyone out there is out to get laid, because that's the quickest way I know to become disinvited to just about everything. Or if you are invited, nobody's going to talk, so just keep that in mind. And here's one that it's just kind of a pet peeve of mine, but I see it all the time. And in fact, some of my partners have seen it very often, and that is never ever attempt to turn a submissive or a slave against his or her dominant or master. Never ask or tell a sub or slave to hide anything from their dominant, or to conceal anything, or to lie to him, or to somehow betray him. So if somebody says, I have a dominant, I have a master, you don't say, well, don't tell him that I bought you this drink, all right? Don't tell him that I was flirting with you. We don't have to ask him for permission to go outside, do we? See, don't do that. Don't do that. You are playing with fire there. First of all, that's the quickest way I know of getting booted out of a place or getting punched in the nose by that person's master. But you will also very quickly become somebody that everyone avoids and nobody wants to talk to or invite to anything. And to be perfectly honest with you, you will very quickly get a reputation as being kind of a stalker. So don't do it. I know it's really easy to be tempted to do something like that. And even people who've been in the lifestyle for many years are sometimes tempted to say something like that, like, oh, well, don't tell your master about this, okay? Sorry, you just asked somebody to betray his or her dominant. And no good submissive is going to do that. Anyone who would do that, first of all, is not a good submissive. Let's just face it. A good submissive is defined almost by a level of trust and honesty that exists between submissive and dominant. And by asking that person to hide something or to somehow betray or deceive his or her master or owner or dominant, you are playing with fire. You are sabotaging somebody's relationship. So don't do it. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the different protocols that you might want to observe at different types of events and in different settings. And I would say that quite a few of these protocols are the same whether you are at a munch group setting at your local restaurant or a coffee shop versus a public play party or a dungeon or something like that. And one of the things, some of the topics that come up over and over again and are a very sore spot for many people, we're going to put right up front here. And we're talking about the subjects of privacy and of touching and of, well, I guess those are the two big ones. We're just going to stick with those for right now. We'll kind of go off on a few tangents after we hit these two big ones. But let's talk about touching first, because there are a lot of people, even in the lifestyle, who've been doing this for a long, long time, who still don't get it. And let's just say the number one rule you probably want to observe when it comes to attending a munch or a play party or anything like that is no touching without permission. Now, that sounds easy. That sounds simple. You would think that's not hard to understand or to explain to people. But strangely enough, there are people who don't get it, even who've been around a very long time. For example, and this is an example of just how murky it can get. I've just told you, no touching without permission, right? Does a handshake count? Do you have to get permission to shake someone's hand? I don't know the answer to that, because I'll tell you the truth. I have shaken a lot of hands over the years without asking permission first. On the other hand, no pun intended, on the other hand, when you stick your hand out to shake someone's hand, it almost requires them to offer a hand in return for that to happen. You don't just reach down and grab somebody's hand while it's in his pocket or while it's at his side. So it's very difficult to shake someone's hand against their will. You put your hand out and say, "Hi, I'm Mike," and either they do or they don't put their hand out and say, "Hi, I'm Bill." So it's usually a self-solving problem when we're talking about handshakes. The problem occurs when we start going beyond the handshake, when we start talking about hugs, for example. And hugs are a sore spot for a lot of people. And let me tell you why. Because the same hug that you or I may see as friendly and welcoming and pleasant and maybe even just a little bit stimulating can be viewed by somebody else as being scary, aggressive, assault, perhaps even too sexually stimulating. I know people who are overstimulated by a simple thing as a hug. I also know people who are victims of previous sexual assaults, and a hug brings back triggers memories that can cause them all sorts of problems. And so you really don't know what's going on in somebody's head. And for you to just walk up to somebody and hug them, put them in a bear hug without their permission, can cause lots of problems. It really can. And there are some people in the lifestyle who make this their crusade, who make it a point to go around and constantly remind people that, you know what, the hug that you think is fun can be life-threatening to somebody else, that if it sends them over the edge and they become emotionally unstable as a result. You just don't know. So please think about what you're doing when you hug somebody. Always ask. Never hug somebody without asking them if it's all right to do it first. And here's the other thing. When you ask somebody if it's all right to give them a hug, that doesn't give you carte blanche to do anything but hug them, all right? So you can hug them, but don't reach down and squeeze their ass. Don't, reach around and pluck a nipple or something. Don't pull her hair and whisper nasty things into her ear. Just hug her or him. All right, and men are not immune from some of these issues. So don't think that this only applies to women. There are men out there who don't like to be hugged. All right, so just ask permission, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just say, "Hey, may I hug you?" And if they say no, don't get your feelings hurt, because sometimes there's a story there that you know nothing about, and really it's none of your business if you're just meeting somebody. Now, personally, I'm kind of a hugger. I hug a lot of people, but I don't hug people in the first meeting. It's usually after I've seen them 3 or 4 times. I'll finally start going from the handshake, and I'll say, "Well, would you rather have a hug?" And sometimes they say yes, and sometimes they say no. So just kind of keep that in mind. Here's the other thing. Being hugged by somebody can be a very aggressive act. Hugging somebody is not so much an aggressive act. So, if you meet somebody who is put off or frightened by hugs, you can offer them the opportunity to hug you. And maybe that's less threatening, and maybe that's more enjoyable for them. So being hugged might scare the crap out of somebody, but hugging somebody, if they're in control, might be something that they enjoy. So you might offer that opportunity to somebody. Again, though, even if you're given permission to touch someone, don't think that gives you carte blanche to touch them any way you want. And if you have permission to hug someone, that's great. That doesn't mean you have permission to grope them or tickle them or choke them or stroke their hair or any of those other things. Those are all individually negotiated with an individual in this lifestyle, and it's a big, big deal. So do not overstep your bounds this way. You will be talked about. You will be identified as a creepy guy or a creepy girl if you do this. And it doesn't, like I said, it's not just men. If some woman thinks that she has carte blanche to come up and grope me or stroke me or play with my hair or whatever, and I've not given that person permission, she's just as wrong. So remember that. Now, let's see. Let's talk about privacy, because privacy is probably the other big deal when it comes to protocols in this lifestyle. And it pretty much applies whether you're at a munch group, a munch or a play party or a public dungeon. It really doesn't matter where you are. Privacy is privacy, and it's a very, very important issue for a lot of people. And you're talking to a guy who has lost a $55,000 a year job because my privacy was violated, and somebody found out some information about my lifestyle and my private life and took it straight to my boss, which happened to be the CEO of a $100 million bank, happened to be very fundamental Christian oriented, and that was all it took, because at a certain point you become a liability to the company. And so what that ended up being was I ended up being called into the office, and he said, Mike, I love you like a son, but you got to go. And this can happen to you. This can happen to anybody if you are portrayed on the internet as some kind of a sadist who likes to beat women and exploit women or whatever. As I'm poly. Just imagine how I look to the corporate world as some kind of crazy polygamist, right? So you can be portrayed in a very, very bad light by people who are unscrupulous or people who are just clueless. And so any hint of using your private information for anything other than just an authorized purpose is usually dealt with very severely, and it can be very much a strike against you if you're trying to make friends and influence people in this lifestyle. So let's talk about some of the things you want to worry about when it comes to privacy. Don't use people's real names if you can avoid it. My co-host on this show is Lil Red. I know her real name. I don't use it. Why? Because she's not given me permission to use it, and you don't really need to know what her real name is in order to enjoy hearing her on the radio. And so there's no reason to. And just because, and tell you what, I go to lots of functions where people all around me are using her real name. That doesn't give me license to use her real name, because maybe she has told them, it's okay if you use it, but she hasn't given me the right to do that. And so just keep that in mind. Just because you hear everyone calling the guy next to you Bob, but he introduced himself to you as, the Spanking Master or something, you call him Spanking Master, even if everyone else is calling him Bob, because maybe he doesn't know you, and maybe he doesn't trust you, maybe he knows and trusts all those other people. And when he gets to know you better, then maybe he'll give you permission to call him Bob. But here's the problem. Maybe all those other people know when they should or shouldn't use his real name, and in front of whom, and in what circumstances. Maybe you just haven't learned that lesson yet, and so he doesn't trust you yet. So don't use people's real names until they give you specific implicit permission to do that. By the same token, no name dropping. And this includes people's screen names, their fetish name, their FetLife name, whatever it is they're using out there in the community. My screen name in the community is Eccentric One. And that's really to, at least in the beginning days, 20 years ago, that was to protect me from losing my job. Well, it didn't work, but by the same token, even now, I really have nothing to hide. But that doesn't mean that everybody out there can use my real name. I prefer they use X or Eccentric One in these social situations, because I don't know everybody there. There might be somebody there who is, working for an ex-wife. There might be somebody there who's a spy for a company that is in competition with your company and just wants to cause trouble for your boss and is following you around to do that. There might be somebody there who is investigating the group for whatever reason. Maybe there's a bad person in the group, and there's a police officer in plain clothes just checking the group out because there's one person in that group that is doing bad things, and you know nothing about that. Well, giving people's real names out under circumstances like that could be very dangerous for people's jobs and their family lives and their relationships and whatever. So just be very careful about name dropping. By name dropping, you don't say, hey, I was at coffee yesterday, and here's a list of everyone who was there. You don't do that, okay? You don't tell everybody who was at the dungeon last weekend and who wasn't there and all those sorts of things. I mean, don't talk about anybody who isn't right there in front of you and hasn't given you permission to do that. We also mentioned no taking pictures. Pictures can definitely get people in trouble. 1 minute you're taking, because once you take a picture and you post it somewhere, you have no control over it. So you might think you're posting it on your Facebook just for friends, and only your best friends will see it, so it's very safe. But guess what? One of your best friends doesn't know that that picture has to be kept private. So he posts it on his public timeline on Facebook. Now everyone sees it. So just because you are observing a certain level of privacy doesn't mean everyone will. Obviously, you don't want to gossip. You don't want to invite yourself anywhere. Now, a lot of groups, let me tell you this, if you're going to a munch for the first time, you're going to be vetted. You're going to be checked out by people to see if you're the kind of person they want to invite to the play party. Sometimes there's a play party after the munch or sometime soon following after a munch, and if they want you to attend the play party, they will invite you. If you hear that somebody's been invited to a play party, you don't invite yourself, and you don't go around asking, hey, I heard there's a play party. How come no one told me about it? Well, there's usually a very good reason for that, probably because they don't know you well enough. So don't assume that everyone at a munch is also invited to a play party, because the standards are much higher for a play party than they are at a munch. Nobody's going to get in too much trouble if you turn out to be a jerk at the coffee shop. But somebody might get into a lot of trouble if you turn out to be a jerk at a play party where people are, putting their social lives, their relationships, their marriages, their jobs at risk if you don't know how to manage that information. All right, so, and speaking of which, you don't want to ask too many prying questions. You definitely don't want to ask where somebody works. You don't want to ask where they hang out when they're not at these play parties. What bars do you go to? What parks do you go to when you're feeding the ducks? Those kinds of things. Because you could very well turn out to be, well, you're not, but they don't know that you're not some kind of a predator, some kind of a stalker. And so, again, people can be very, very paranoid about that, and you should respect that, I think. So, now, I know we've talked about a lot of things, and there's probably a million things you wanted to talk about or wanted me to talk about that we didn't hit on. And, of course, when people think about protocols, they think about, how do you address someone? How do you disagree with someone? How do you, do you kneel? Do you stand? Do you bow? Do you curtsy? Do you, dance a jig, and perform any particular little rituals in your relationships? And the bottom line is the protocols in your relationships will be, as Red said, will be negotiated between you and your dominant or you and your submissive. And so I don't really need to tell you whether you should, make eye contact or not, whether you should kneel or not, whether you should, greet your dominant at the door naked with a martini or not. Those protocols are going to be something that you establish in your relationships with your partners. And I have no doubt that you're going to be fully capable. If you have other questions about protocols and manners and those unspoken rules that we observe in the lifestyle, then by all means contact me. I told you how to do that at the beginning of the show. Just use the contact form on the website at domination-submission.com, or just hit me up on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Tumblr, or any of the other 15 social media platforms that I happen to be on. So I appreciate you being here tonight and listening. I hope you'll listen to us regularly. My name is Mike McKay. I'm the author of Domination and Submission, the BDSM Relationship Handbook, in the top 10 on Amazon as we speak. Check it out, and we'll see you next week.